You need a wife, and I need a dad. Her voice, muffled by the glass, cut through the limo's soundproofing like a diamond. Maxwell froze, not at the audacity, but the truth. Thomas, his driver, oblivious. What he didn't know, couldn't possibly fathom, was that this wasn't some random encounter. Stella, all of 4 years old, saw something Maxwell had buried under balance sheets and quarterly reports. A soul starving for connection. He looked at the woman rushing towards them, panic etched on her face. Apologies tumbled from her lips. She didn't mean to bother you, but she had, more than they knew. They think he's just a rich guy. Annoyed. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. It starts tonight, with dinner. That's the deal. You need a wife, and I need a dad. Her voice, muffled by the glass, cut through the limo's soundproofing like a diamond. Maxwell froze, not at the audacity, but the truth. Thomas, his driver, oblivious. What he didn't know, couldn't possibly fathom, was that this wasn't some random encounter. Stella, all of 4 years old, saw something Maxwell had buried under balance sheets and quarterly reports. A soul starving for connection. He looked at the woman rushing towards them, panic etched on her face. Apologies tumbled from her lips. She didn't mean to bother you, but she had, more than they knew. They think he's just a rich guy. Annoyed. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. It starts tonight, with dinner. That's the deal. The limousine, a rolling fortress of tinted glass and plush leather, idled at a red light in a forgotten corner of the city. Maxwell Donovan, a titan of finance usually immune to such trivial delays, barely registered the stop. His thumb danced across his phone, refreshing a news feed saturated with his latest triumph. The acquisition of a rival firm, Donovan Financial Group, swallowing another minnow whole. 37 years old, master of his domain, alone. Tonight, the silence of his opulent penthouse promised to be heavier than usual. It was his birthday, a milestone he usually marked with a perfunctory power lunch. Thomas, ever the dutiful employee, had offered suggestions. A reservation at La Maison, perhaps? Maxwell had brushed him off. Fine dining felt obscene when the only company you had was the ghost of ambition. This part of town, where struggling storefronts clung to life between boarded-up buildings, was a world away from the gleaming towers he usually inhabited. Normally, the city outside his window was just a blur of fleeting lights. Tonight, however, something snagged his attention. A splash of color in the gray landscape. A little girl, no older than 4, stood transfixed on the sidewalk. Her hair, a riot of golden curls, haloed her face as she stared at the limousine with an intensity that bordered on reverence. She clutched a faded, threadbare bunny, its button eyes gazing forlornly ahead. Her face, smudged with something that might have been chocolate, held an expression of pure, unadulterated wonder. He watched, a flicker of something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It was a feeling so foreign, he couldn't quite name it, only that it felt a world away from the cold satisfaction of a done deal. Driven by an impulse he didn't understand, she took a tentative step closer. Another. Soon she was pressed against the cool glass, her small hand leaving a smudge on the pristine surface. Her eyes, wide and earnest, locked onto his. Then, with a boldness that belied her size, she leaned closer and whispered, her breath misting the window in a cloud of innocence and unspoken need. He'd frozen in place, the digital world on his phone dissolving into insignificance. The light turned green. Thomas, ever watchful, started to accelerate. A sharp gesture from Maxwell stopped him. "Sir?" Thomas's voice, laced with professional curiosity, crackled over the intercom. Ignoring him, Maxwell lowered the window. The city's cacophony, sirens, car horns, the distant thrum of a bus engine, rushed in, a jarring contrast to the limousine's sterile silence. "Hello," he said, his voice rusty from disuse. "That's quite a statement." The girl didn't flinch. Her gaze remained unwavering. "It's true. You look sad in there, like nobody wants to give you a hug. And I don't have a daddy. Maybe we could share." Before he could formulate a response, a figure burst from the doorway of a nearby laundromat, a whirlwind of frayed denim and frantic energy. "Stella!" The woman's voice, raw with panic, sliced through the urban din. She looked young, barely out of her 20s, with the same cascade of golden hair hastily pulled back into a ponytail. Laundry overflowed from her arms. She scooped Stella up in a hug. "What did I tell you about running off, sweetheart?" I turned around for 1 second. Relief washed over her face, quickly replaced by mortification as she turned to Maxwell. "I am so incredibly sorry, sir. She didn't mean to bother you." "She wasn't bothering me," Maxwell said, surprised by the honesty in his own voice. A flush crept up the woman's neck. "Stella has a very active imagination." She tightened her grip on her daughter. "Come on, sweetie, we need to get home." Stella dug in her heels, clutching her bunny tighter. "But Mommy, he's lonely, and we're lonely too. You said it last night, remember? You wish Stella had a father who would tuck her in at night." The woman's face burned crimson. Tears welled in her eyes. "Stella, that's private. You can't just tell strangers." "Why not?" Stella demanded, her logic impeccable. "You always say telling the truth is important." Maxwell, acting on pure instinct, found himself climbing out of the limousine. Thomas watched him, dumbfounded. He stood on the grimy sidewalk, a beacon of bespoke tailoring and polished leather, facing a woman with overflowing laundry and a daughter with unwavering honesty. "I'm Maxwell," he said, extending a hand. "Maxwell Donovan, and your daughter is right. I was sitting in that car feeling sorry for myself because it's my birthday, and I have no one to spend it with." Her observation was more accurate than she could possibly have known. The woman shifted the laundry basket to awkwardly shake his hand. "Claire," she said softly. "Claire Morrison. And this is Stella. I'm really sorry about all this. She doesn't understand boundaries." "I liked what she said," Maxwell countered, surprising himself. "It was the most honest thing anyone has said to me in months. Most people tell me what they think I want to hear." He looked down at Stella, her gaze unwavering. "You're very observant, Stella. How did you know I needed a wife?" Stella tilted her head, considering. "Because you were all alone in that big fancy car," she stated as a simple fact. "And you look like my mommy looks sometimes when she thinks I'm not watching. Sad and lonely." She paused, then added with irrefutable logic, "Mommy says everybody needs somebody, so I thought maybe you needed us, and we needed you." Claire's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she hugged the laundry basket tighter. "I should get her home. I apologize for the intrusion." "Wait," Maxwell heard himself say. "It's my birthday, and I was planning on spending it alone, eating takeout in an empty apartment. Would you consider joining me for dinner instead? Both of you? Nothing fancy, just a meal between three people who, according to Stella, all need somebody." Claire stared at him as if he'd suggested they rob a bank. "That's very kind, but we couldn't possibly. You don't know us. We're strangers." "Strangers are just friends we haven't met yet," Stella announced, clearly quoting a well-worn phrase. "That's what Miss Jenny at daycare says." A genuine smile, the first in weeks, tugged at Maxwell's lips. "Miss Jenny sounds very wise." "Please, Claire, I'm not asking for anything except company for dinner. You can choose the restaurant, somewhere public and safe. I just don't want to spend my birthday alone, and your daughter has already made it more memorable than any birthday I've had in years." Claire looked from Maxwell to Stella, uncertainty warring with something else, a flicker of hope in her tired eyes. "Why would you want to have dinner with us? We're just ordinary people. You're clearly someone important." "That's exactly why," Maxwell said quietly. "I'm surrounded by important people every day. People who want something from me or want to be seen with me. Your daughter wanted nothing except to point out a truth. That's rare. That's valuable. Please say yes." Stella tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, can we go? I'm hungry and he seems nice. And it's his birthday. We can't let him be alone on his birthday." Claire bit her lip, and Maxwell could see the internal struggle playing out across her face. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Okay, but somewhere simple. And I insist on paying for our own meals." "Absolutely not," Maxwell said. "It's my birthday, which means I choose the rules, and the birthday rule is that I pay, but you can choose the restaurant." 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a small Italian restaurant that Claire knew, a family-owned place with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh bread filling the air. Thomas had driven them, looking bemused, but not commenting on his employer's unusual behavior. Stella sat between them in a booster seat, her bunny occupying a chair of its own, and chattered happily about everything from her favorite color to the cat she had seen that morning. Claire was quieter, still uncertain, but gradually relaxing as Maxwell asked gentle questions and listened with genuine interest. He learned that Claire was a widow, that her husband had died in a car accident when Stella was just 6 months old. She worked 2 jobs, one as a receptionist during the day and another cleaning offices at night, barely making enough to cover rent and daycare. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, and doing her best to give Stella a happy childhood despite the struggles. I talked to her about her father, Claire said softly, glancing at Stella, who was absorbed in coloring on the paper placemat the restaurant had provided. I want her to know she had a dad who loved her, even if he's not here anymore. But lately she's been asking why other kids have daddies who are alive, who come to school events and push them on swings. I don't know how to explain that life isn't fair in a way a 4-year-old can understand. Maxwell felt something tighten in his chest. My parents died when I was young, he said. I was raised by my grandfather. He was a good man, but he was old and tired, and I spent a lot of time alone. I learned early that if I wanted anything in life, I had to build it myself. So I built a company, a reputation, a fortune, but I forgot to build a life around it. He looked at Stella, who had abandoned her coloring to listen to the adults with solemn attention. Your daughter reminded me of that today. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. Dinner arrived and they ate together, the conversation flowing more easily now. Maxwell found himself laughing at Stella's stories, enchanted by her innocent wisdom and unfiltered observations. Claire slowly opened up, sharing her dreams of going back to school someday, of becoming a teacher, of giving Stella a more stable life. Why teaching? Maxwell asked. Because teachers changed my life, Claire said simply. When my parents were fighting, when things were hard at home, my teachers were the ones who made me feel seen and valued. I want to do that for other kids. As the evening wore on, Maxwell felt something shifting inside him, like a door he had kept locked for years was slowly opening. This woman with her quiet strength, this child with her fearless honesty, they were showing him what he had been missing in his calculated, controlled existence. When dessert arrived, a small birthday cake that Claire had quietly arranged with the restaurant, and Stella sang happy birthday with more enthusiasm than pitch. Maxwell felt tears prick his eyes for the first time since his grandfather's funeral. Make a wish, Stella commanded, her eyes shining in the candlelight. Maxwell closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he made a wish that had nothing to do with business or success. He wished for more moments like this, for connection, for the courage to open his carefully guarded heart. As Thomas drove them home later, dropping Claire and Stella at their modest apartment building, Maxwell found himself asking for Claire's phone number. I'd like to see you both again, he said, if that would be okay. Claire hesitated, then nodded. Stella was right, she said softly. You do seem lonely, and so am I. Maybe we could be friends. Just friends to start. Friends sounds perfect, Maxwell agreed. Over the following months, Maxwell became a regular presence in their lives. He showed up for Stella's daycare performances, took them to the zoo on weekends, and found himself spending more time away from the office and more time living. He helped Claire enroll in night classes, covered her tuition with a scholarship from a foundation he quietly established for single parents pursuing education. Claire resisted his help at first, proud and independent, but eventually accepted it with grace when he explained that she was giving him something far more valuable in return, a reason to remember what mattered. Stella appointed herself matchmaker, constantly engineering situations to push her mother and Maxwell together. Her efforts were transparent and endearing, and both adults pretended not to notice while secretly grateful for her intervention. One evening, nearly a year after that first encounter outside the limousine, Maxwell took Claire and Stella to a small park where Stella loved to feed the ducks. As the little girl ran ahead, Maxwell took Claire's hand. Your daughter was right that day. He said, I did need a wife and she needed a dad. But more than that, I needed both of you to remind me how to live, how to love, how to be human again. Claire smiled, tears shining in her eyes. We needed you too, Not for your money or your success, but for you. For the man who was kind enough to listen to a 4-year-old's wisdom, brave enough to step out of his protected world, generous enough to open his heart. They were married 6 months later in a simple ceremony with Stella as the flower girl, clutching the same stuffed bunny she had held that day by the limousine. And Maxwell Donovan, who had spent years building an empire alone, finally understood that the greatest success was not measured in wealth or power, but in the love you give and receive. Sometimes wisdom comes from the most unexpected sources. A child's whispered observation, an honest moment of vulnerability, a willingness to step out of a limousine and into life. And sometimes the family we need finds us in the most unlikely ways at exactly the moment we need them most. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of unexpected connections, honest hearts, and the courage to embrace second chances. Comment below and tell us about a time when a child's wisdom changed your perspective or when an unexpected encounter led to blessings you never imagined. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.